Hello and welcome to the Tough Girl podcast, which is all about motivating and inspiring you. I'm your host, Sarah Williams. Today, I'm delighted we're going to be speaking to adventurer Tarka L'Herpiniere. And I have probably butchered her name, but I'll get her to say it in the correct way. Katie has a passion for adventure, challenging her limits both physically and mentally, and exploring this wonderful world in which we live. Katie has gone on to do some incredible challenges, from walking the entire length of the Great Wall of China from its westernmost terminus to its easternmost, a trip of 1,670 days over 4,500 kilometers. She has also done the longest crossing of the southern Patagonian ice caps by a woman, as well as racing in the Transcontinental unsupported single-stage 4,000 kilometer bike race across Europe. Hi, Katie. How are you?
Hi, Sarah. I'm really well. Thank you so much for having me here on your podcast.
No, absolutely fabulous. Now, I know I have butchered your surname, but how would you say your surname in French?
L'Herpiniere.
L'Herpiniere. Oh, sounds fabulous. So, Katie, you have done some incredible adventures, challenges. You've pushed yourself both physically and mentally. You have been exploring this incredible world. But I'm really interested in how it all sort of started. But before we do that, do you just want to tell everybody just a little bit more about you?
Oh, goodness. Absolutely. So I'm now 38. Don't know how that happened. And I now live in France in the French Alps. I'm very lucky to spend my days living in a ski resort, which is fantastic. And I love living here because I have a huge passion for cycling. And in the summer, the Alps are kind of cycling mecca. But I come originally from Devon, and actually my kind of start in life was an equestrian one. I was a horse rider and did eventing for many years. And then, I ended up in France because I married a Frenchman.
Love it. Absolutely fantastic. So almost the question is where were you, you're doing the horse riding. Did you have a big love of the outdoors living down in Devon? Were you always sort of spending time like out on the beach or out walking? Was that sort of part of your growing up?
Yes, to a degree. When I was very small, kind of before I got into horses, definitely weekend walks with mum and dad were part of the weekly routine along the coast paths of, Devon and Cornwall and things like that. But it wasn't, we were outdoorsy, but not sporty as such. It wasn't like my parents were into kind of triathlons or anything that kind of led me to be sporty. I got into horses kind of by chance because my parents heard that dreadful word, I'm bored, one school holiday, and didn't want that to happen. So sent me off to a riding school to have a lesson. And I think they regret it greatly because it's cost them an awful lot of money over the years. So outdoorsy, horses. Obviously I did sport at school and I loved sport, but I'm actually quite lazy. It's probably going to sound a little bit weird, but definitely I'm lazy by nature. I am competitive and I love achieving, but it doesn't come naturally for me to kind of want to do all the training side of things.
Oh, to be honest, I get that. I think sometimes I can't work out whether I'm being lazy or I'm trying to listen to my body. And sometimes my body is saying like, don't do it, just stay where you are. When did it really start for you, these big adventures? Was there a progression, or is there just this one moment in time where it was like, do you know what? I am going to go and do the longest crossing of the southern Patagonia ice cap by a woman, or cycling across Africa, or doing the Transcontinental race. Where did it all start?
It started on a holiday in the French Alps where I met a polar explorer, for want of a better term, called Tarka. And we'd met once before, also in the French Alps through kind of family friends, barely spoke. He was just kind of this odd Frenchman that was throwing himself into frozen lakes and timing himself how long it took to get out. And I just thought he was very weird. And he thought I was a bit weird because I was a model at the time and obviously probably wore far too much makeup and far too little clothes. And he just thought I was a bit odd. And I watched EastEnders, which didn't really sit very well with him. So we just kind of, were polite to each other because we were all kind of with family friends, but nothing more was really said. And then I met him again 6 months later when I came out again, family friends, to the French Alps for a short summer holiday. And we got on much better. And on the second day of the holiday, we'd gone for a little walk and he was chatting to me and he asked me if I wanted to walk to the North Pole with him. Obviously, I said no. What on earth would I want to walk to the North Pole with him for? But yeah, a few days went on. We got on very well. He came to see me in the UK. He didn't have a lot of money at the time, so he actually cycled on his push bike from his home in the French Alps to my home in Devon to come and see me, which was commitment. And yes, so our kind of friendship blossomed from there and we became a couple. But he never really let the North Pole thing drop. He just took time to convince me that I was capable of far more than I thought. And, why shouldn't I be able to do that? And I was like, oh, well, eventually I kind of thought, well, I suppose I don't really have a good enough reason other than I just think I can't do it. And so I eventually agreed, but under I said, if I was going to do something like this, then maybe I should do something easier to start with. And I, for my sins, kind of suggested maybe we should walk the Great Wall of China because it was on my kind of bucket list of things to see, places to go. And I kind of imagined it would be a couple of weeks and take some nice pictures, that kind of thing. But once I'd mentioned it, he didn't let it drop. And before I knew it, I was training hard to doing a 4,500 world first walk across the Great Wall of China. So that's how it began.
Oh, do you know what? There's so many different things in there I sort of want to pick into. The first is like, wow, that's an intense second date. This let's go walk to the North Pole. I'd be like, let's have dinner first.
Yes.
But the interesting thing was around your confidence and that you didn't really have any excuses. It was just that you thought you couldn't do it. And I think I can almost relate to that because it's almost like such an extreme thing, and that if you haven't done anything before, you've got nothing to base it on. How did that? I suppose I want to know like how that evolved, and when you decided to say, okay, obviously you wanted to do that. Start with an easier first step in the Great Wall of China, but how did you get from A to B? Because it's still quite it's big steps to take.
I think it helps that I am quite open to doing new things in the sense of I don't have a focused plan for my life. Sometimes I went to university and I was studying with people who were very definite about what they wanted to do, what they wanted to achieve, where they were heading. And I never really had that, but that didn't worry me. I didn't feel kind of lost. I just thought it kind of allows opportunities to arise if you're sometimes not so channeled, because perhaps otherwise you can be a bit blinkered to things that might appear. So I've always been kind of like, oh, something will happen, who knows what it will be, but there'll be opportunities and I'll see which one, and been quite carefree in life in that regards. So I was kind of open to the idea of doing random things with life, because that's kind of what life's all about, in my opinion. But yeah, walking to the North Pole, I didn't really know anything about the polar regions. I'd heard of a man called Sir Ranulph Fiennes, and all I knew about with him was he'd cut a couple of his fingers off with a saw in the garden after getting frostbite at the North Pole. So I didn't really think I was cut out for that. But Tarka is an incredibly persuasive person in the fact that he truly believes anybody is capable of anything, and it's infectious. And when you start to live with someone who feels like that, it's incredible how quick it is for him to make you believe that you are capable of more.
So why the Great Wall of China? Had you spent time in China before? Is it just something that you thought about? Where did that idea come from?
No, I'd not been to China before. It was just, one of the wonders of the world that I felt like we all need to see, and I kind of flippantly mentioned it, but that was enough. Once it had come out of my mouth, Tarka had kind of run away with it and there was no going back. So it wasn't even a case of it was top on my bucket list. It was just just a flippant mention, oh, what about the Great Wall of China? That'd be cool to see. Why don't we walk the length of it? I didn't know how long it was. I didn't know whether anyone had done it before. I imagine lots of people had. So actually, when Tarka was looking into it, he first thought we might need to be doing it, in some special way. But it turns out it was a little bit further than we thought, and the conditions were going to be a little bit more difficult than we thought. So it turned out to be a great challenge just in the simplicity of walking.
Tell us about some of the conditions that you faced over there.
So started in the Gobi Desert, kind of plus 40 degrees, tried to walk through night just to get a bit of coolness to the walking. But later in the expedition, it kind of ranged to minus 40, so real range in temperatures. Within week 1, I had chronic dehydration and gastroenteritis, and actually Tarka had to make a kind of makeshift shelter in the middle of the desert and run off to find help so that I could get to hospital. And he did that. After many hours, he managed to flag down a bus that was driving along a desert road. And I think he kind of freaked them out, because we're talking an entire coachload of Chinese people who have never ever seen a Westerner, and there's this strange man waving crazily in front of the bus and wasn't going to move until it stopped, and then through sign language kind of made them drive the bus through the desert across the sand to rescue me. And then once they actually found me, they kind of were military in there, gathering me, getting me on the bus, getting me to hospital. And I was on a drip for about 4 days there. So that was only week 1, which wasn't boding well for how I was going to take to this expedition life. Maybe my family and friends were right in thinking that I wasn't cut out for this. In fact, I'm sure they had a sweepstake on how long I was going to last, and it wasn't going to be very long. So that was quite difficult to get back in a taxi to kind of the place where it had all gone horribly wrong just within a week and carry on. But I'm a stubborn soul, so I did that. What else happened? I ate all sorts of creatures and parts of animals that I never anticipated I would eat. I had compression of the spine about 2/3 of the way through the trip. I was an inch shorter when I got home than when I started the journey. And the hospital didn't want me to continue the journey. But again, I was a stubborn soul. So sent back all the kit that we felt wasn't critical, and to reduce my load. And Tarka took a lot of the rest of the weight so that I could continue. Had the biggest snowstorm in 50 years China had ever seen. Had to walk through that. What else? Oh, so many things. I didn't eat for kind of 3 days at a time. Lots of exciting things, but it was all made doable because of the incredible, can't stress how amazing they were, hospitality of the people we met along the journey. And bearing in mind 99% of them had never ever seen a Westerner, and me, blonde, 6 foot in a fuchsia pink suit from head to toe coming out of the desert, was probably like an alien landing to them. So they were a little frightened at first, but very soon the smiles started, and they would have just given us their absolute world and never wanted a thing in return. They were truly wonderful. And because of their hospitality, we were actually able to send back some of the kit when I hurt my spine, because so many nights, particularly when it was cold, they wouldn't let us sleep outside, and we'd come into their houses and all line up like sardines on their one bed, which the entire 3-generation families would sleep on. And they'd just make a little bit more room for us and feed us. Oh, it was incredible, really incredible.
Oh, there's so many things in there. Just even, how to plan a trip like this, how to get fit for it, heading out into these, into the desert where it is, 40 odd degrees plus, then get, colder nights when it's going down to like minus 40, the language, the food. I mean, you obviously had a lot of challenges, a lot of things maybe not going to plan. Why did you end up persevering? Had you done, because you'd never done sort of endurance stuff before, a trip like this, you never actually faced these issues or problems. And I know you had, obviously, having Tarka there would have been an incredible support, but mentally in you, why did you keep going? Because it can't just be being stubborn. There must have been something else driving you.
Yeah, a number of factors. I am competitive from my days eventing. I had a wonderful, and he might hate me for saying, but slightly pushy father. When we went to a competition, we were there to win. Second place was first loser, so it was quite a competitive nature growing up eventing. Which I loved, and I loved being pushed because, as I say, I'm a little bit lazy by nature, so I need to be pushed by other people to kind of fulfill perhaps what I'm capable of, and so that's kind of within me. And obviously, I had the support from Tarka. We were also raising money for the Make-A-Wish Foundation, fabulous charity, and I'm going to admit, I did probably cry every single day for the 167 days along the journey. But when you are crying and finding it hard and everything else, and you get a chance to check the website and the messages, and you've got wonderful messages from families of the Make-A-Wish Foundation who, deal with so much hardship, not chosen, and mine was chosen, that you're very quick to, stop moaning and pull your socks up and realize it was your choice to come. You can do this. So that really helped. And maybe a little bit of me just wanted to prove all the doubters wrong.
God, no, I mean, good for you. I mean, what was it like completing the challenge? Or, being out there for 167 days is huge. I mean, just can you try and take us with you over the final days when you're knowing that you were going to complete this incredible challenge? Yeah,
absolutely. It was life-changing. It sounds corny, but it was truly life-changing. I am 100% a different person who finished, the one that started, and much prefer the person that finished than the person that started, who was perhaps a little bit spoiled and didn't really know kind of what the world was all about. And by probably the day before the end, was incredibly sad that it was coming to an end, because it was within 6 months. That's long enough for it to become kind of your way of life. And at that point, as much as my body was completely falling apart at the seams, because it doesn't matter whether it's 1 week, 1 month, 6 months, your body knows when the end is near and just starts falling apart. That just seems to be standard way of when you're doing expeditions and journeys. So apart from that, emotionally, this had become life, and it was a really simple, lovely way of life where you only had to think about primal things, about eating, drinking, sleeping, and moving. And I loved it, and it had become, normal. So I was actually really, really sad for it to end, just because what was now normal was going to change again. But then at the end, I could see, so my mum and dad had come to the very last bit of wall to be there at the end, and I could see them from quite a way off. So I was howling in tears by the time I walked up the very final step of the Great Wall to give them a hug. And mum was crying, and I gave her a massive hug, and it was really emotional and lovely. But within a split second, she had kind of launched back from me really quite quickly, and dad also, like, they weren't near me. And then I could see they were actually kind of retching, and the stench was so bad that they couldn't be anywhere near us, because in 6 months, 1 set of clothes and 2 showers, we smelt more than we had anticipated. And the smell was so bad that they couldn't actually be kind of next to us or do any more hugging or celebrating like that. And it was quite a pong. But actually, when we finished, because of all my incidences along the way, hospital visits, etc., we were pretty pushed for time. We actually had 6 hours from when we finished the wall to get to the airport to get out of the country before the visa expired. So we were very quick to kind of finish the journey, take some pictures, chat with mum and dad, and get in a taxi to get to the city. But we had every window down, and everyone's heads were hanging out at the window just to get the journey, because we smelled so bad.
I want to ask more about the reflections of the trip and what you've learned, which I will do. But how long did it take you to get the smell out? Like, what was one shower enough? Or
yes, a long shower. But I shampooed my hair kind of 2 or 3 times before I put conditioner in and had a very long shower. But Mum had brought some clothes out, which I didn't fit into. I was too fat. Who would have thought you could walk all day, every day for 6 months and end up bigger than when you started? But yes, no, we became clean quite quickly. And I think we hadn't realised we'd smelt so bad, mainly because walking through the winter, most of the time, especially through the latter part of the journey, it was cold. So you don't, smell the smells quite the same as in the heat. But also all the people we're staying with, they probably washed as little as we did too, because there were no showers or even bowls of water to wash. So we probably all smelled together, and hence we didn't notice it.
Oh, it's such an incredibly like different way of life, which you've almost obviously got used to, like that your days out there. I mean, you completed the Great Wall of China on the 18th of March 2007, over 10 years ago now. I mean, looking back, you said that you changed as a person, from who you were when you started to who you were when you finished. What do you think? Do you think you've remained changed, or have you slipped back to who you were? Almost just reflecting back now on that journey.
You slip back on the little things, like when you're living a day-to-day life where you don't need all the luxuries of life. You kind of have this impression, when I go home, I don't need this, and this, which kind of consumed my life before. And you have this great intention of, I don't know, using less electricity or whatever else it is, or, social media, whatever. And you think, this simple life, I'm going to take some of this home with me and live a bit more like this because it's wonderful. But that disappears quite quickly, and you slip back into your old ways. But what I feel I'm capable of, and how I push myself, and just what I believe the human body in general can now endure, will never go away. I think China, the biggest thing that I kind of took away from it, that feeling of achievement or success in whatever kind of in whatever way of life, whether it's business or adventure or anything else. I think that feeling of success and achievement is 100% directly proportional to the effort and pain and suffering sounds a bit harsh, but you know what I mean, to what you put in. And I don't think that will ever leave me. So yeah, if something comes a bit easy, then I don't feel like you enjoy it quite so much or get from it quite so much. So yeah, I like a bit of hardship to get the rewards to feel better.
Yeah. I mean, how was it doing it with a partner as well? I mean, spending 24 hours a day with this individual who you obviously, are going out with, but that must have been incredibly tough on your relationship.
I think, I think I was very fortunate. Tarka and I had an incredible relationship where we were together for 11 years, and I think we only had maybe one argument to a push. We just got on very well, and particularly on expedition, Tarka's say-so was final because he had more experience than me. So although we'd both have input to decision-making, there was always a clear final word from Tarka, and that was kind of a rule, so that we didn't, there was no, we should have done this, we should have done that kind of brewing. And yeah, we just got on. I'm just really, really fortunate, I think. I know a lot of couples who love each other dearly probably couldn't bear spending more than a couple of weeks together. But yeah, we spent all day, every day together, pretty much for 11 years. So that was just normal to us.
What was it like when you finished the Great Wall of China and you went home? I mean, we've talked about this a lot, like suffering with like the adventure blues, or not knowing what to do next, or just like that change from doing what you were doing for so long to a completely different way of life. Did you suffer from any of that?
Well, we were already planning the next adventure on the plane on the way home. So no, there was never really a downtime. From the moment I started well, really from the moment I met Tarka and started on this path of adventure, it's just been a rolling ball. And, you know, I've been on one trip planning another trip, or I've met someone on one trip which has given an idea for another, and it's just kept flowing. So I haven't really had any downtime until more recently. So my last big trip was in 2009, and then did go through about a 5-year period where I kind of walked away from the world of adventure.
Why was that?
Sponsorship. At the time, I was trying to organise a very, very big expedition which needed a very large amount of funding from sponsors, and had spent a long, long time in many meetings, got down to the final kind of sign on the dotted line day, and the banks crashed and one of them was a bank. So that kind of fell away, and just kind of got really disheartened by that side of adventure. It's fantastic if you've just got lots of money and you can just go and do everything just for yourself. But if you are reliant on sponsors and partners and working with brands, actually that can be really hard and disheartening and take away a little bit from what adventure should all be about. And we just got to that point where we just found it tough to make a living out of it. We earned a living from public speaking and making documentaries and things, and it just became really tough. And we wanted to earn some proper money, so decided to kind of walk away from it and set up some businesses. And we did that. We were web designing, and actually Tarka was designing a film, online linear film festival, and before I knew it, I had a dog bed business. very random. And that became life for probably 5 years. Didn't do any form of adventure at all, and then I just realized how much I missed it. And now, since for the last kind of 3 years, have been dipping my toe back in and doing more and more.
I think it's really interesting, actually, just bringing up like the finance, because I think a lot of people were making the assumptions, how are you funding the trip for the Great Wall of China? How did you fund your cycle across Africa? And we don't really get to discuss like the financial aspects of it, whether it's around like sponsorship and funding. And actually, you know, for you guys, you actually went the other way, where you had to walk away because you actually needed to earn some money. What was that like, making that transition?
Yeah, so most of the trips I've done haven't needed a huge amount of money. The actual ones that I managed to get off the ground, like the Great Wall of China, for example, actually only cost us £1,000 each for the 6 months we were in China. Actually, we came home with money as well. So if I was at home in England, I'm sure we'd all spend more than £1,000 to live for 6 months. So it wasn't a lot of money so much to do the trip, but you're not earning money. There's no, you know, if you had rent on a house, etc., you've still got to find all that. And for many years, I was very fortunate that my parents, I still lived at home, and they kind of paid the day-to-day kind of expenses. They fed me, they housed me. So when I earned money, I could save that to go on the next adventure. But then you do reach an age where you think, oh, my poor parents, I really should let them get on with their own lives and take care of myself. And I think that was where we'd got to. We just, you know, it wasn't that we didn't want to live with my parents anymore, but we'd reached the point where we felt there's two of us, they're taking care of us. For us to swan around doing wonderful adventures, that's not very fair on them. We need to buckle down and make some real money ourselves so we can live.
Yeah, when I say I get it, I'm currently in my parents' house at this moment in time, being fed by my parents, exactly. And having my day-to-day expenses taken care of. But I have also, you know, I'm 36, going to be 37 this year, and that's the age that I've reached. It's just like, actually, it can't continue. So I do understand. So out of the other challenges that you've done, which other challenge, you know, stands out for you? I mean, I know it's difficult to like play favorites with challenges, but which one was which one's almost like the most memorable, or which one would you like to talk about next?
China will always be the most memorable because it was the first and was effectively the most life-changing. My journey across the southern Patagonian ice cap was the most horrific experience of my life, and in a way was life-changing from the other angle of that I realized there are some challenges that I don't want to do. I'm not I don't love that enough to die for it. And on the southern Patagonian ice cap, I felt like I did nearly die many times, but I felt like I was going to die every minute. It was that bad. And I don't love mountaineering and the kind of skill set involved in that expedition enough to die for it. And so I think that by the end of that journey, I mean, accidents can happen doing anything, obviously, but it wasn't going to be an accident. It was almost like we were asking for it. So I think that journey really made me understand that I love adventure, but there are some things that I'm happy to say no to. And I think that that's a good thing. I don't think you have to be superhuman and ultra brave and just pretend you can do everything, because I can't do that. That's beyond me mentally.
But also, I think that's so great to be able to admit that, because you don't have to love every single aspect of adventure. I mean, for me, it's the cold. Like, I could never see myself in the Arctic or the Antarctic unless I was going as, a tourist to go and look at the animals or something. But tell us a bit more about that, because that sounds pretty horrendous, the fact that you're thinking you're going to die every single day. What was the purpose of the expedition?
So the expedition was to do a world first. It was an unsupported, unassisted full crossing of the southern Patagonian ice cap, which is a place where lots of people look at the Patagonian ice cap from the edges, and it truly is the most stunning part of the world. But very, very, very few people actually go up on and into the ice cap itself. It's not mapped. We had to get NASA to help us with some imaging so that we could plot a route. There aren't maps for it yet. There is no rescue. With most trips, if you pay enough insurance, someone will come and get you by plane or helicopter when you're Arctic, but no one was going to come and get you from the southern Patagonian ice cap. If you go on, it's for you to get off. So it's a pretty risky place to be. And there had been a handful of journeys previously across the ice cap, but they'd either used kites or they'd had resupplies left or various other means that meant no one had done this full crossing, and Tarka had set his heart on it, and I had just blindly agreed. Naivety was bliss, and headed off on what was way out of my comfort zone. I have mild form of chonophobia, which is an irrational fear of snow and ice, so it's probably not the best place for me to go at the best of times. And I had no mountaineering experience. I couldn't really ski, so training was pretty intense. Did a lot of crevasse extraction, that kind of training. And from the moment we got there, it just was really hell on earth. The journey we were on the ice cap for 35 days, saw the sky 3 times. The weather was up to 140 kilometer an hour winds. Just it's a wet cold. It's so much moisture. You would just everything would get soaked and then freeze. So your clothes, getting in your ski boots in the morning was like giving birth. I had carbon monoxide poisoning halfway through the journey, and actually pretty much died. Fortunately, was resuscitated by Tarka. I had blood pouring from all sorts of orifices. I'd completely stopped breathing. I'd fitted. That was pretty frightening. Fell down crevasses hour after hour. But the kind of crux of the journey was the most difficult part of the journey was at where the ice cap hourglassed, and to get down to the next section was a 400-meter ice cliff. So we knew we had to wait for good weather window to start making the descent on that section. So we set up tent and we waited for 5 days for a weather window on kind of half rations, hoping the weather got better and, watching our fuel and food supplies dwindle. And actually living on half rations is, even with your partner, is a pretty intense situation, because as you're taking a spoonful each from your freeze-dried bag, you kind of study the size of the spoonful and double check they haven't had any more than you, and if there's one spoonful left, you'll fight over it. It becomes that kind of serious how hungry you are. But sadly, after the 5th day in horrific storms, horrific winds, and the snow was just falling so fast. We'd get outside the tent every few hours to completely dig out the tent, because it was just literally burying us alive. And we'd move it to, a bit of higher ground. And during one of these times we were digging out the tent, the poles had just become too weak, and the tent poles just snapped. And in the wind, with the sharp edges of the tent pole, within seconds, the tent had been ripped to pieces, and it was just horrific. We're kind of hands and knees on the snow, screaming at each other, trying to work out a plan. We've got no tent, no form of rescue, and the snow's coming down and the wind, and we're literally being buried alive. So we went into Tarka is a pretty calm person in general, but I could see even in his eyes that this was pretty serious time. So we made a kind of makeshift shelter with kind of more like a pyramid shelter, with the bit of tent we had left and our ski poles and skis, and we kind of got inside, started to eat our remaining rations, because we really needed to be full and warm so that we could think rationally, and kind of tried to hatch a plan as what we were going to do now, how we were going to get off the ice cap. But we did have that awful conversation where we didn't think we were going to last the night. So you chat about whether you call your parents and you say your goodbyes, or it's best never to have that chat at all. We decided not to make the call, and thankfully we made it through the night. And then we battled another 5 days off the ice cap, not in the direction we wanted to go, but to where we felt was going to be the safest and quickest option off. And that took 5 days with no tent. By this point, I had snow blindness and Tarka had frostbite. And we made the first ascent of a particular glacier to where we hoped we'd find help. And sadly, the glacier was too temperamental at its base for a boat to come and collect us. So we had to get a helicopter. But we were very grateful to the military who came and saved us. And I was kind of done with that place after all of that.
I can imagine. Well, I mean, some people might say that you were almost very inexperienced to go to a place like that without maybe having the necessary training or background. I mean, how do you handle responses like that, or to be putting yourself in that situation where it is like life and death constantly?
I definitely didn't have the experience probably needed to go there. Tarka has more experience than you could ever need. He was climbing mountains before he could kind of walk. That he's done so many polar trips and everything else, Everest and various things. So he definitely has the credentials that no one would question him being there, and probably enough credentials that he could get away with taking me. And although I didn't have the experience, I had done a lot of training to have the skill set. I mean, on an hourly basis, when you're in a complete thick whiteout skiing along, we'd be roped together. The rope would be 10 meters between us, but I could probably only see a meter or 2 meters in front of me. I could just see a rope going into white in front of me. That was all day, every day, pretty much. I couldn't ever see Tarka. I could just see a rope going straight out into nothingness. And then at some point, you never knew when it was going to happen, that rope would yank me, I'd fall to the floor, and I know he's gone down a crevasse, and it's for me to get him out. And so I did have the skill set to do that. I trained, and I knew how to self-arrest and get him out, and get the kit out, and we'd kind of dust ourselves down and we'd start that all again. So I didn't have the experience in the fact that I'd been in those kind of situations before, but equally there aren't many places where you'd get that are like Patagonia without going to Patagonia. So yeah, I can see people might see I wasn't experienced enough, perhaps, but I don't think my experience was any problems with the issues we faced on the ice cap. Where it went wrong and when our tent was destroyed kind of was nothing to do with experience. It was just really unfortunate. And the kind of things that went wrong on a day-to-day basis were more weather related rather than experience or doing it wrong or that kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, the resilience that you've shown and the courage and even just managing and dealing with your fear when you're out there in that extreme environment. I mean, mentally, what were you learning? What were the tips? What were the tricks? What were you having to do to keep yourself, moving forward, to keep yourself calm? What were you doing?
So because my fear of snow at that stage in life was still pretty great, I actually was working with a sports psychologist prior to the trip and during the trip, and she was actually programmed into the sat phone, and I did have to call her twice during the trip when I was kind of paper bag stage of having a moment, but actually sometimes just the kind of Tarka would say, right, I'm going to call Sarah, and that alone, not wanting to kind of be seen to being weak, was kind of enough for me to pull my socks up. But yeah, on 2 occasions I did have to speak to Sarah, and she was fantastic at kind of talking me through things and trying to work out what it exactly was I was afraid of. And I think it just comes down to I'm actually afraid of everything. So I spend a lot of time crying and not really enjoying myself. I'm very much seems to be a lover of type 2 fun. I never really enjoy these things during them, but I don't know if it's just that competitive nature, but I just want to succeed enough that I'll endure it, even if I'm whimpering away to myself. I don't really moan, I just whimper away to myself. And if someone says, "You okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine." It's just my body's release. So I did have help, and I can't really emphasize enough how much faith. I think with Tarka being my partner as well, I knew he wouldn't want to see anything happen to me, and I think that that kind of belief that he would look after me probably meant I was stronger than if it had just been me on my own, with my own emotions.
I mean, you were with Tarka for 11 years, and then I think things ended, but you're now divorced. What was it like making that transition from being able to do these incredible expeditions with Tarka to wanting to do adventures on your own and to start doing them solo? It was
it probably sounds a little bit strange, but actually that was one of the reasons why we ended up getting divorced. He'd just completely lost his love for adventure, and I was desperate to get back into it. And I just wanted I started doing things on my own, which is great, and there's definitely an element of it's a bigger challenge to do something on your own because you've only got yourself to rely on. But I also love sharing things with somebody. And when you go and do an incredible adventure or see an incredible part of the world, having someone to say, "Oh, do you remember when?" That kind of feeling. I love that element more perhaps than doing things solo. And we just started we'd gone from a life where we'd done everything together. We'd worked together, expeditions together, we trained together, we went on TV, news channels together, we wrote articles together, we did public speaking together, to suddenly life had become very distant. And although we were great friends, we were just a bit more what's the word? Just kind of getting on with our own lives, and they didn't really interact very much, and that was really sad. And although we get on still great, I just kind of, the Tarka I married, who was this polar explorer that loved all that kind of thing, had changed into a business mogul, and he now is doing fantastically well in America. He's a software developer in Silicon Valley and doing incredibly well, and does very, very important things, something to do with our mobile phones and how they work, but I don't really understand it. But yes, just life changes, and we're just changed in different directions, sadly.
So what was the first challenge that you decided to do by yourself?
I signed up for the Transcontinental bike race, which was a 4,300 kilometer race from Belgium to Istanbul. And I was definitely set to enter solo, but my parents were not having any of it at all. I think it'd been a long time since I'd been on an expedition or a big journey, and I hadn't done any on my own because I'd done everything with Tarka. And they were just really concerned. Just I think being on a bike through some of those countries on the roads is just dangerous in the fact that the lorries and the bus drivers can be quite frightening. And they were just adamant I couldn't do it on my own. So I said, okay, I'll do it with a friend. And I found a friend that was interested to do it with me. But sadly, a few months into training, she realized it really wasn't for her. And then I really struggled to find somebody to do it with me at short notice. And I was preparing myself to do it on my own. I was dead set to do it on my own, but no one else wanted me to. They were so worried for my safety. So eventually, only a week before the race, through Facebook, somebody who knew somebody found me a race partner, Jane, and I actually met her the day before the start line. And so that was fantastic. So although it was not a solo trip, it was still me on my own, not with Tarka, if that makes sense. And it was an incredible race. It's unsupported. You rest and sleep for as long as you need. You find food wherever you can. There's 3 checkpoints that you have to go through on the way to the finish line. Clock never stops, and racing kind of 200 other people across the continent, which was fantastic. I learned an awful lot from Jane. She was an incredibly experienced cyclist. I wasn't at all. In fact, I was probably the most unexperienced cyclist in the entire race, but it had caught my heart when I'd first seen it, so I signed up anyway. Sadly, I didn't make the finish. I actually collapsed off the bike 11 days in after doing 3,200 kilometers, which was heartbreaking, but you live and learn.
Absolutely. I mean, it's an incredible race, actually, the Transcontinental race. I've spoken to sort of quite a few other women who've done this solo, unsupported race across Europe. I mean, you're doing some phenomenal distances. Can you just sort of explain what a typical day would be like for you when you were out there?
Yeah, so our plan and what we managed to execute for the journey, we averaged 300 kilometers a day. Our biggest day was about 350 kilometers an hour a day, which, bearing in mind, kind of 100k before that for me had been huge. So it was a massive jump, and we try to get 3 or 4 hours sleep of an evening. We weren't bivvying. Some people just bivvy on the side of the road, or just, grab 30 minutes a day or something ridiculous. Jane and I used accommodation as and where we could find it. And that was mainly just to charge up our devices, phone, Garmin, routing tools, so that they'd get a bit of juice while we grabbed a couple of hours sleep. And you just ride and ride and ride, eat as much as you can whenever you can. And I cried a lot again. That's standard with me. I did warn Jane at the start line. I said, I know we've never met, but I might cry a lot, but don't worry. It doesn't mean that, I'm going to quit or anything. It's just my body's way of releasing. And and the body fell apart pretty quick, actually. By day one, neither of us had any skin on our nether regions whatsoever. So we lived off painkillers just to get on and sit on the saddle all day, every day. My toes, I lost all the feeling in my toes by day 2, and they took months to come back. I don't really know what all that was about. I got cycler's palsy in my hands, which meant I couldn't, particularly with one hand, I couldn't change gear. I had to kind of take the other hand and cross over and cross gear, which meant kind of breaking and things like that was a bit concerning. Couldn't do the zips up on my clothes, struggled to hold a fork. I had ulcers and acid spots on my tongue, which meant eating was kind of ridiculous. And the body just didn't hold up as well as I hoped. And after 11 days, just had chronic dehydration, exhaustion, and just collapsed off the bike. But I realised it was probably 2 days before that where it kind of went horribly wrong for me. And the fact that we'd been eating just food from garages for quite a few days in Croatia and Bosnia. We hadn't really found any proper food as such, and it had all just been a bit sweet, and you're drinking lots of cans of Coke and things like that, and my mouth was just falling apart. My mouth is a bit of an issue area generally, and I just really struggled to put food in it because it was so painful. And then eventually kind of something inside turned my appetite off because it knew eating was becoming painful, and just the body ran out of steam. But I won't let that happen again. I am now very, very regimented at how much I eat, how every hour, and how much I drink every hour, and have kind of made good steps towards eating properly on these kind of adventures. Oh
my goodness. I mean, you do honestly put your body through a huge amount, especially with the variety of challenges that you've done, from walking Great Wall of China to being in Patagonia on the ice caps to the cycling challenges. How long does it take you to recover?
They seem to recover kind of straight away. Soon as the trips are finished, but a couple of days of kind of hobbling around after a trip and either putting on weight if you've lost lots, or trying to lose weight if you've put it on. But I touch wood, I haven't had any injuries specific to those kind of big trips that have been detrimental ongoing. I did enter a race the summer just gone, a race around the coast of Ireland, and I did tear my Achilles, but equally, I could have done that on a training ride, so I kind of don't include that as a problem. But no, when I lost an inch in height in China, but I saw a chiropractor and he stretched me all out, so that was fine. Carbon monoxide poisoning, I nearly died from that, but within 12 hours I was skiing again. So the body is just really resilient. Not mine, in general, just I just think the human body is so much more capable than we kind of give it credit for. And although hurting and suffering seems to be something I do a lot of, it's kind of momentary.
What are the plans for 2018?
So 2018, oh God, I mean, there's the plans I'm actually doing and the plans I'd really love to be doing. I've got many lists on my wall. Some of them I can't afford to do, but I dream about. And then there's the ones that I can kind of scrabble around to make enough money to make happen. So currently the event I'm most looking forward to for 2018 is called the Silk Road Mountain Race, which is another unsupported bike race, but this one's in Kyrgyzstan, which is somewhere I've wanted to go for so many years, and it's off-road. I don't own a mountain bike yet, but I'll work on that. So another skill set to learn in the meantime. And just really excited. It's all in the mountains. I think I'm most excited because although it's a bike race, it's going to be a bit more than about how well you can ride your bike, because I'm not particularly fast on a bicycle. It's going to be more about kind of decision making and looking after yourself, and kind of when you stop, because if you decide to sleep at 3,700 meters, that's not going to do the body quite so well as if you decide to ride on a bit and come down to a lower altitude, and when you're going to get your next food, because we are truly going to be in the middle of nowhere. There's no phone reception. It's exciting because it's a bike race, but it feels more like it's going to be an expedition like I used to do. So it's kind of a halfway house into getting back to what I used to do.
Oh my God, it sounds absolutely fantastic. Love it. Now, if people want to find out more about you, your adventures, and where's the best place for people to find you on social media?
I have my own website where I try and blog about my journeys, and that's katiejaneendurance.com. But social media, the one I kind of update the most would be Instagram, and that's Katie L'Herpiniere, which no one's probably going to be able to spell. So, Katie, Katie, and then L'Herpiniere is Lherpiniere.
Oh, fantastic. And Katie, throughout all of your different challenges and adventures and exploring the world, what advice would you have for other women and girls who do want to live a more adventurous life?
Go with the difficult question there. Right. I think my advice can only really be the things that I've learned and kind of that have stuck with me, and the things that now I try and live my life by. And they are, as I said before, that feeling of accomplishment and success and achievement is directly proportional to the hardship and how hard you work to get it. So if something seems too easy, then dream bigger and you'll feel greater rewards. I also am I'm not a lover of routine. I think kind of routine is a bit of an enemy. It makes time fly by. So I like to do different things and just change things up, and don't get stuck in kind of that routine that a lot of people end up in. And I just think it's, before you know it, a week's gone past and a month's gone past and a year's gone past. And I just feel like we need to cram in as much excitement and intensity and adventure and challenges as we can, just to get the most out of life, and it makes you smile. And that's what it's all about.
Oh, Katie, absolutely. It does. It makes you smile. So get outside, go and do that adventure, go and do that challenge. But thank you so much for coming on the Tough Girl podcast to share more about your incredible life and your incredible adventures.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Hey Tribe, thank you so much for listening to the episode with Katie Jane. I hope it has inspired you to think up what challenges and adventures that you're going to go on, whether they are massive, massive, massive challenges or smaller adventures that you can do close to home. I wanted to pick up on quite an important fact, which I think is really, really relevant, and we need to talk about it more, which is money and funding and sponsorship. So I actually received an Instagram direct message. I'm going to very quickly read it out to you, just so you can get an inkling of the types of messages that I get in response to this, because I 100% agree with it, but I'll let you read it too. So, hey Sarah, I've recently started listening to your podcast and I'm loving it. Thank you. The one thing I keep hearing from all of the amazing women that you interview is how they gave up their jobs to pursue their adventurous ambitions, how it was a tough decision, risk, etc., but it was worth it. However, they never talk about how they make money from these trips, adventures, or fund and support themselves. I would love to hear about how it is feasible for them to pursue the amazing lives that they lead. The message is always, anyone can do it, but there seems to be a gap in the stories that illustrate how these girls can fund these amazing trips, afford to take months out at a time, or change their whole life. I'm often screaming how at my speakers. So first of all, I completely agree with this message, with what is being shared. And it's something that I am definitely trying to do more of, which is to speak about the money, the funding, how people can afford to live these lifestyles, because it is this very grey area. I mean, I've been very, very open and honest. I'd like to think I have anyway, about my financial situation. If you've listened to the podcast before, you're probably bored of hearing this, but it's like, I live at home with my parents. I'm very, very fortunate. I don't spend money on clothing or going out. I have to say no to so many opportunities. I don't go on holiday. I can't remember the last time I went to the theatre or went to the cinema. I can't remember the last time I bought a DVD. I've been to the cinema once this year. So I am very, very careful with the funds that I spend. And when I first started my business, it was all about investing everything that I had. So I did have savings. I did work in banking, which was well paid. I had enough savings to set the business, pay for Marathon des Sables, and to support me while I went traveling for 18 months. But that has drastically changed in the 3 years since that has happened. I mean, a lot of adventurers, whether they make it public or not, they may live at home with their parents. Many of them have extra jobs. I currently, if I add up the amount of other extra work that I do, so I work in a coffee shop at the weekend. I do regional interviews for Camp America. During the summer when I'm here, I'm actually the hat historian for Royal Ascot. So I sell silk top hats down at Ascot every year if I'm available. Last year I was working for NCS, the National Citizenship Service. I'm going to be doing that again this summer. I've sold a lot of my stuff on eBay. I got rid of like all my jewelry. I did a big chunk of that to make money to fund my Appalachian Trail adventure, which, I think only got me maybe like £300, £250. If you listen to my daily podcast, I'll probably tell you how much I got from it. And you can make money from speaking gigs. I've written 3 books. And I have funds coming in from Amazon, but it's not a lot of money. It's, each month from Amazon, I probably get around £30-40, which will pay for my gym membership or my phone bill. But where I get the majority of my income is through Patreon, patreon.com, which is for creatives. And I'm just looking back at an article I wrote on the website, which, please do go and check it out at toughgirlchallenges.com, which is where it's been one of my most popular blog posts, which is how I afford to blog and podcast. And I wrote this on December 13, 2016. And I basically talk about the fact that I do live at home with my parents, the different jobs that I do. I also share more about the difference that Patreon has made for me. So back then, when I started Patreon, I was receiving $9 a month. By the time it got to December, I started to make $187 a month. Now, even with that, took me until January, February 2017 for me not to be making a loss on what I do, because there are costs involved of building a brand, from running your own website, hosting the podcast, doing your social media, your actual time involved. And it is a challenge. And I would never, ever say to anyone, just quit your job and go out and make it happen, because it is an incredibly competitive and it is an incredibly difficult area to get in. You've got to have some sort of plan, some sort of plan of action. You've either got to have different skills that you can use to utilize, whether you've trained up as a personal trainer, whether you've got your the walking qualifications, or you're a trained running coach, and there's different ways for you to have income coming in. Now, you may be in a fortunate position that you have a spouse or partner who can support you on your expeditions. That can happen. There's no right or wrong way of doing adventure, but please, what I would say is do take everything with a pinch of salt, because many people who seem to have like brand partnerships or brand sponsorships, often they're not getting paid for it. So for example, you'll get sent in the post, can you promote my socks, for example, and you get sent socks in the post, and socks is great and wonderful, and receiving free gear is amazing, but free gear doesn't pay your bills, doesn't allow you to do what you want to go out. You actually do have to go out and have some ways of making money. I mean, the other things that I do are speaking engagements, motivational talks, but again, they are competitive, and you've got to feel comfortable standing up on the stage and be able to deliver a powerful message that is going to resonate with your audience. And if it's not something you've done before, you've got to factor in the time to think, how am I going to get good at public speaking? You've got to go into schools. You've got to give up your time for free until you get to that point where actually you think, you know what, I am really, really good at this, and actually I deserve to be paid for what I'm doing. And I think for a lot of women, and especially for me, it can be incredibly difficult to almost stand up and say, actually, what I'm doing is adding value. I deserve to be paid for it, and no, I'm not going to be doing that for free. But it does come at a balance. Now, what I would recommend that you do is Cathy O'Dowd, who is an Everest mountaineer who has been on the podcast before. She shared more about climbing. She was the first woman to climb Mount Everest from the north and the south side, but she's actually started a fabulous website called Business of Adventure. And if you're in a similar situation, go and check out this website, read through the different articles, because there are ways to monetize, there are ways to make money, but it is not easy. But she does a weekly newsletter which contains tips on funding and branding, adventure grants, leads for media opportunities. And it collates everything about the money side of adventure. And she's trying to dig into this and get more details, because a lot of the time it is, unfortunately, fake it till you make it. And many people actually don't make it, and then they'll just slowly disappear off and have to go back and do something else, which is not to say that that's a bad thing, or maybe they just get tired of adventure or tired of the lifestyle, tired of having to say no to everything and actually not being able to do what they want to do. I could obviously talk about this for ages, but I know this has been a long podcast. I work with, I do coaching. I don't really publicize it that much because my time is so precious. So I generally only work with 1 or 2 clients every couple of months. If you do want to speak to me about this and you're looking for hints or tips or tricks or to how to develop a plan or to ask me questions about this, then please do go check out toughgirlchallenges.com. There is a coaching section. You can email me. We can book in a time slot. We can talk it through if that's what you think will be appropriate. But otherwise, what I do is start doing your research now, start listening to the podcast, start reading the blogs of other people, start thinking, who do you want to be like in this adventure world? Is there a mentor or somebody that you think, do you know what, that's the lifestyle that I want to be doing, those are the challenges that I want to be doing? Find that person to see how they did it, what steps did they take. And many adventurers do have books, they share their social media content. I also did a daily podcast in 2017 where every single day I shared what I was doing, and you definitely get to see, you know, the high points and the low points as I was trying to gather all the equipment that I needed for the Appalachian Trail, how I figured out my costs, how I actually funded it, and how I paid for it. So there is a ton of information out there, but you've got to do the research yourself and just figure out what it is that you're actually after, and whether you be comfortable going from having a regular salary and when you've got a boss and somebody to blame to suddenly being your own boss, having to be self-motivated and driven, not having a regular salary, not knowing where the money's going to come from, and not knowing what is going to happen. It is a very uncertain future. So I don't know if that's made you all more confused or inspired you, but as I say, there's a lot of information out there. Please do go check out toughgirlchallenges.com. I'm always at the end of an email, sarah@toughgirlchallenges.com. I'm on Twitter. You can DM me on Instagram, etc. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. But have an awesome Tuesday wherever you are, whatever you are doing. If you do want to support the podcast and support me and my mission, become a patron, sign up, $5 a month, $10 a month, $15 a month. That would be epic. Patreon.com/toughgirlpodcast. Big thank you to all of my patrons. I've now got, I think it's 170 patrons, which is amazing. And I could not do this without their support, their financial support every single month, because it does make a massive difference. Tribe, have an awesome week. I'll speak to you next Tuesday. Right, lots of love. Bye.